Hello students, welcome to the English language All India Open Mock Analysis. Let's start with the first question. The first question says that you have to choose the word most similar in meaning to the given word in capitals. So the word given in capitals here is ostracize. Here it is. And therefore the appropriate meaning for this particular word is cut off because ostracize means to be excluded from a social group. When you ostracize someone, you remove them from your social group, you ask them to live on their own. So therefore the correct option is cut off. There may be one option here which some people might not know the meaning of, which is expedite. Expedite means to make something happen sooner, and therefore is not the correct option. The right answer is B. Moving on to the next question, alacrity. Alacrity is cheerful readiness when you are enthusiastically ready for something to happen, which is pretty close to the word eagerness, which is synonymous to being eager, and therefore this is the right answer. Moving on to the next question. Now, in these two questions, you have to select the word which is most nearly opposite in meaning to the word given in capitals. The third question is profusion. The word profusion, which means having an excess of something or having a large quantity of something or something which is in abundance. So since we have to select the opposite option, the right answer here would be, of course, scarcity. Travesty may be again a word which some people might not know the meaning of. It means a distorted representation of something or a cheap mockery of something. Hence, therefore, is not the right answer. The right answer is C, scarcity. The next question is insolent. Insolent is being rude and arrogant or showing some sort of lack of respect. And the opposite, exact opposite of this word would be affable. Affable is being likable, being someone who is sociable, who can get along with people easily. So definitely, such a person is not going to be someone who is going to be extremely rude. The rest of the three options are pretty self-explanatory, I suppose. All right, moving on to the next question. All right, moving on to the next question. It's a fill in the blank question. The question says, his book was marked by many dash remarks which made us forget its main theme. Now, considering the four option, the most appropriate option here would be definitely irrelevant because the remarks were irrelevant to what was being said in the book. So therefore, they may have caused people to digress or to uh, go along some other tangent than what the theme is actually talking about. Objective is something which is not subjective, which does not vary from person to person, so therefore this cannot be the right answer. Slanted is tilted. You cannot have slanted or tilted remarks, so therefore this is not the right answer. Circumspect is being cautious, but in the given context this does not fit really well because being cautious won't lead you to forget the main theme. So the right answer has to be irrelevant, which is A. Moving on to the next question. Some people have the capacity for learning foreign language, but they have no dash to speak. So in this case, people have the capacity or ability to learn the foreign language, but they may not have interest to speak. But that doesn't really make sense because if you're learning a language, you would definitely want to speak it. In the similar vein, there is this word inclination. All right, I'll do this question again. The next question is, some people have the capacity for learning foreign language, but they have no dash to speak. So here an appropriate option would be ability. Ability is the right answer. They have no ability to speak. Some people might get confused thinking that A, interest could be an appropriate option. That is a viable choice, but if you think in the in real world terms, some people have the capacity for learning foreign language, so of course they would want to speak. So it is unlikely that they will have no interest to speak at all, but they want to learn the language. Similarly, inclination can also be eliminated. Inclination can be eliminated because it again means a liking or tendency to speak. So people may have capacity for learning foreign language, but not have any liking or interest to speak does not make any sense. In the same, similarly, fondness also doesn't make any sense. So the answer has to be B, ability. The following two given questions, question 7 and question 8, you have to identify the part which has the error, a grammatical error, and you have to mark it. So in the first question, the question number 7, it says, it was a year since I received any letter from my sister, and the last option is no error. The error in this part is, in this question, is in the first sentence. First part, which is it was a year since. It should be it has been a year since I received any letter. The reason being, because we are talking about a point of time in the past, and that particular event is continuing over to the present. So a more appropriate tense to choose in this particular case would be a present perfect tense and not a simple past tense. This part A of this particular question is being given in simple past tense, therefore it is incorrect. It should be it has been a year since I received any letter. In the next question, he went to office but returned back home immediately, and no error. So in this particular case, the answer has to be B, but return back, because the word back automatically has the same effect which the word returned has, and therefore it is redundant or unnecessary. Only the word returned will be sufficient in this particular case. So the corrected sentence would be he went to office but returned home immediately. To the Moving on to the next two questions, question number 9 and 10. You have to choose the correctly spelled word. It is pretty self-explanatory. The right answer in case of question number 9 is C, gregarious, Gregarious. And in case of question number 10, the right answer is again C, perpetuate, which is Perpetuate. Now we talk about questions which deal with phrases. You have to choose the word that or the sentence that describe the best defines the given phrase. Now we talk about questions which deal with phrases. You have to choose the option which best defines the given phrases. Now in case of the first phrase, which is to talk through one's hat, the meaning of this particular phrase is to talk nonsense, to talk gibberish, to talk something which does not make any sense at all, and therefore the answer has to be B, to talk nonsense. In case of question number 12, to get into hot water, it means to be in a lot of trouble where you might be facing some sort of criticism or some sort of danger, to get in a situation where it is very risky for you, or where you can automatically understand that soon you're going to be in some problem. So the answer has to be C, to get into trouble. Next question is to flog a dead horse. So you can automatically imagine that if you have a dead horse and you're flogging it, it is not going to result in anything at all. And therefore the answer has to be to waste one's efforts. Option number B, to waste one's effort or to do something repeatedly which does not actually yield any result at all. In the next question, question number 14, a bull in a china shop. Here China is not referring to the country China, because I hope that is understood, because the C here is not capitalized. It is referring to the bone china utensils, which are extremely fragile and break very easily. So to be a bull in a china shop, it means to be a very clumsy kind of a person who does not know how to act or behave, and often leads to a lot of physical damage being done because of being clumsy. So in this particular case, the answer has to be D, a rough and clumsy person at a place where skill and care are required. It is very easy to remember this particular phrase, especially because you can always imagine a bull actually entering a shop which has a lot of bone china white colored utensils kept, and how that particular bull might act, because he doesn't know anything about how fragile those things are, and it will inevitably lead to a lot of damage. So in the following question, which is a closed test, there a paragraph has been given and certain words have been removed, and you have to choose the right word from the given options to fill in those blanks. Now, in this particular case, okay, I'll start with reading the passage and you can follow along. How the domestication of animals began is not known. Perhaps there were large numbers of animals in areas near water where men also were dash. In this case, there are four options: concentrated, intensified, strengthened, and amassed. Just by looking at the options at first, we can automatically remove or eliminate option number B, which is intensified, which does not fit into this particular blank, and strengthened. Okay. Now, according to the sentence, perhaps there were large numbers of animals in areas near water where men were also amassed. This is a sort of a tricky question whether you would go with amassed or concentrated. Amassed has a feeling of the action being taking place, as in areas near water where men were also being gathered or they were being brought together or accumulated. A bit more better option here would be concentrated, as in people were already present there and they were present in large numbers in a higher density. Therefore, A has to be the right answer. Moving on. Here, men could observe the animals and study their habits, and this knowledge must have dash him to tame them. So, men could have observed the animals and studied the habits, and what would this knowledge do for them so that they could tame them? So, it could authorize them, but the knowledge is not giving any command or giving any sort of authority in this case. So, option C is eliminated. Could the knowledge have modified them? No, of course not. Knowledge could have enabled them or rendered them. Now, rendered in this particular case means to give or provide or to make someone or something. So, in this particular blank, the knowledge must have made him to tame them would be a more appropriate, or knowledge must have enabled him to tame them. Enabled here, the sense is to empower or to cause or to give ability to. So, given the context, the right answer has to be B, enabled, because it is more appropriate than the A option. Moving on, it was again easy for an dash people to domesticate animals and feed them on the husks of grain that were left after threshing. Here, there's a very obvious clue so that you could have easily selected the right answer, which is the article "an." The article "an" automatic means the next word which will come will have a vowel sound in the beginning. So the only option here is agriculture. So, an agriculture. It was again easy for an agriculture people to domesticate animals and feed them on the husks of the grain that were left after threshing. In this particular blank, in this particular case, there might be this particular doubt that how could an agriculture people make sense, because people is plural, but it is being preceded by an article which denotes a singular, which is an. So you have to keep in mind that in this particular case, they are comparing different sets of people, different lots of people, or different groups of people, and not talking about people in general. If they were talking about people in general, it would have not taken a singular article. But since they're talking about different kinds of people and then choosing just one group out of them, for example, they could have been agriculture people, they could have been hunter people, they could have been, say, for example, knitting people, they could have been gatherer people. So these are different groups of people that they're talking about. And therefore, out of this, only one group is being talked about. So, an agriculture people makes sense. Moving on, in any event, sheep and goats, pigs and cattle, and later horses and asses were tamed and kept in pens. Man thus dash food from the soil and also from animals. In the pens, the animals could be observed even more closely. So, in question number 18, you have several options. What could be the most appropriate option? Man thus attained food from the soil. Makes sense. So, let's keep this option as a plausible option. Man thus obtained food from the soil. Okay. Man thus gained food from the soil. Okay. Man thus achieved food from the soil. You cannot achieve food. It doesn't make any sense. We'll remove this option. Now, you have to pay attention. Attained also means achieve something or to move towards something. So in this particular case, attained also does not make sense. We'll eliminate that option as well. Option number A is gone. Option number D is gone. Now we're talking about option B and C. Could man have gained food from the soil, or could man have obtained food from the soil? So of course the right answer here is obtained. It makes sense because the intended meaning is deriving fruit from the soil and not profiting from the soil. So therefore obtain makes sense here. So right answer is B. Moving on, blank number 19. I'll continue reading the passage. Calves suckling milk must have given man the idea that he too could get food other than meat from cows and goats. This practice, which combines agriculture with the raising of animals, is known as dash farming. The phrase joint farming or united farming or blended farming does not exist. The right phrase to be used here is mixed farming, which is basically when you are growing the regular crops along with raising livestock on the same land. That is the appropriate answer here, and the answer is D. Moving on to the next question. Question number 20 and question number 21 are both para-completion type questions, wherein a group of word has been removed from a passage and you have to select the right option which represents that particular group of word which should come inside the passage. Now, in this particular case, in para-completion questions, it is important to keep in mind what the passage is actually talking about, the main idea of the passage, and what it is actually not talking about. Both of these are important. Like I did in closest, I'll start reading from the beginning. Conventional education makes independent thinking extremely difficult. Blank. To be different from the group or to resist environment is not easy and is often risky as long as we worship success. The point to keep in mind in this particular question, in order to understand the right meaning of this particular passage, is this particular phrase, independent thinking. Independent thinking, you have to keep in mind, is not the same as creative thinking or being creative or being innovative or being novel. Independent thinking, when you talk about it, you are emphasizing on the fact that you are thinking in a way which is not getting influenced by environment. Now, your thoughts that might be produced may or may not be similar to those of others around you, but you are 100% sure that they came from out of your own judgment and not because of getting emotionally attached or influenced by what others think. So, since they are talking about independent thinking, option A, creative and innovative thinking, which is thinking new ideas. They are by nature different from other people, but the emphasis is on novelty. But when you talk about independent thinking, emphasis is on not getting influenced. So option A as well as option B will both be eliminated. C again does not make any sense because the focus is not on whether it has influenced careers or not and how it might be influencing careers at all. There is no talk about careers in the passage. So option C is also eliminated. So we are left with option D, which is the right answer. Conformity leads to mediocrity. What is the negative effect of not thinking independently? And this adds value to the passage as well and explains why this particular passage is to be read. Or rather, what the consequences of this particular event is going to be, as in when independent thinking becomes extremely difficult. Next question, question 21. More fundamentally, the TIFF has uncovered a deep rift in the two countries' perceptions of each other. Here, TIFF means a fight, a petty fight or a petty quarrel between, especially between two friends. So, a quarrel has uncovered a deep rift. Here means a gap or a break of friendly relations. So, what has happened? The two countries must have fought over a petty thing, and it would have led to the understanding that they are not as friendly as they used to be. The rift has uncovered a deep rift in the two countries' perception of each other. From the Indian perspective, America remains unwilling to afford it the respect a true partner deserves. And from the American, the Indian response reveals both a brittle anxiety about its own status and a callous disregard for the well being of the person. Callous means being stone hearted or insensitive. So, from American perspective, the Indians were probably being insensitive and they were showing disregard for the well being of the person the American justice system saw as a victim in this story, the maid. So, from the American justice system's perspective, the victim in whatever the story this particular passage is talking about was the maid. The whole passage seems to be talking about some incident which has led to a lot of fighting or a lot of petty quarrel between the two countries, and it has led to a feeling of discontent or lack of friendliness between the two countries. And one of the characters in this particular story must be some maid. Moving on to the options, option number B. Let's talk about option number B first. America is known for stringent labor laws and its ruthless enforcement. This option does not make sense in the context of the passage because the main idea or the focus of the passage seems to be the fight which has happened between the two countries or the lack of friendly relationship which has happened between the two countries. So, option number B does not make sense. It seems way out of scope for this particular passage. Similarly, option number D, if the rift widens, it may impact the peace and stability in South Asia. The passage was not talking about South Asia, it was just focused on the two countries. So, option D again does not make much sense. Let's check out the option C. The Indian US relations has therefore been damaged irreversibly. Since it was a tiff, it was a petty fight, the passage did not give a sense that the damage was of such intense consequence. So option number C seems to be too extreme for this particular passage. So again, option number C, B, as well as D are eliminated. Option number A makes some sense because it says rather than partners, the two countries look like strangers. Again, giving some more dramatic perspective on what has happened between the two countries, how the fight has led them to behave in a manner as if two friends have broken up and they are now behaving like strangers. So option A seems to be the right answer here. In the following two questions, question 22 and question 23, we'll be dealing with a few confusables, words which are often confused with each other. uh, you have been given a sentence and you have to choose the right word which should fit in that particular place. So for example, in the first question, question 22, the first sentence reads as almost every decade, someone or the other comes out with the prophecy A, which is the option A, and prophecy, which is the option B, that the world is going to end. In this sentence, the word prophecy, which is B, is actually incorrect. Why? Because it is a verb. It is a verb. On the other hand, prophecy, the one ending with cy, is noun and is correct. The reason being it is being preceded by a preposition, and preposition is always followed by its object, which can be either a noun or a pronoun. So here, almost every decade, someone or the other comes out with the prophecy is correct that the world is going to A. So the first sentence has the right answer as A. In the second sentence, I loathe to admit that I was totally jealous. Here, the first word loathe is actually an adjective. This word is an adjective. But the usage, if you pay attention to the usage, it seems that the required word should be a verb and not an adjective. If the sentence was a bit different, it was I am loath to admit, then A would have been the right answer. But here it is not the case, so the right answer is B, loath, which means to hate. So I hate to admit that I was totally jealous, or I loathe to admit that I was totally jealous is correct. One more point about the other word, loath, which is the adjective. This means to be unwilling to. So here, context-wise also, it does not make much sense. So the right answer has to be A and B. In the next question, question 23, the first sentence says, the college affected or effected a new policy on leave encashment by teachers. So here the college is probably enforcing or bringing about a new policy and therefore affected, which is also a verb, makes sense. Affected does not make sense because affected means influence. So they might not be simply influencing the policy, but they might be bringing it about or causing it to happen, which is the meaning of affected, and therefore B is the right answer. In the next sentence, the rationale or rationale behind current curricula is that students need to learn language and thinking skills, not specific information. Here again, rationale and rational, the confusion is because of the part of speech which they belong to. Rational is a noun while rational is an adjective. And remember, wherever you encounter an adjective, it should always be qualifying some other noun or pronoun. In this case, the word rational does not seem to be qualifying anything at all and is therefore the wrong answer. So the rational what, we are always begging the question in the sense, the rational what behind current curricula. So rational should have been followed by a noun. In this particular case, rationale, which is a noun in itself, makes perfect sense and is therefore the right answer. So the option which you have to mark is the one which has B and A, that is option C. The next two questions are parajumble questions. These are sentence parajumble questions, as in different parts of the same sentence have been jumbled up, and you have to unjumble them. The first and the last parts, I'm sorry, the first and the last part are fixed and should not be changed. That is the sentence one or the part one, and part six need not be changed. You just have to unjumble P, Q, R, and S options or parts. Now, in this particular case, let's start reading the parajumble from the first sentence itself. Economic domination, anger, and a different language of persons speaking often causes a sense of revolt. If you pay attention, economic domination, immediately after economic domination, the part which will come, the plausible options for that are very few. For example, economic domination, anger, and so B right after one does not make any sense. Economic domination, a different language, does not make much sense. Economic domination of persons speaking makes some sense. Economic domination often causes something something makes some sense. So let's keep the options R and S, which should follow the first sentence. But if you focus on the options which have been provided to you, none of the options start with S. So definitely S is not going to come right after 1. Only R can come right after sentence 1 or the part 1, which leaves us with two options, that is RQPS and RQSP, and eliminates the other two. Now, let's consider option C, RQPS, economic domination of persons speaking a different language, anger and. Okay, anger right after language does not make much sense. It's probably not the right answer. Let's check option D, RQSP, economic domination of persons speaking a different language often causes anger and a sense of revolt. So this makes sense and therefore is the right answer. This was a fairly easy parajumble question. Moving on to the next question, question 25. In this case, for the first sentence, sentence 1, there could be multiple options which can come right after it. For example, it may be of comparatively little consequence, makes sense. It may be whilst everything depends upon, still makes sense. It may be how a man is governed from outside, makes some sense. It may be how he governs, does not make much sense because there is a pronoun he here, whose antecedent has not been described so far. So S might not follow one. However, this is a lengthier method, and since we know there are multiple options and there may be confusion, we can move directly to sentence 6 and see what might come right before it and see if it helps us. So, himself from within. Let's start keeping one sentence right before sentence 6. Sentence P first. It may be of comparatively little consequence. Of comparatively little consequence, himself from within does not make much sense. Whilst everything depends upon himself from within makes some sense. How a man is governed from outside himself from within does not make any sense. How he governs himself from within makes a lot more sense than option Q. So definitely the last sentence which will come right before 6 has to be S, this sentence, and therefore these two options are eliminated. So only C and D make sense in this particular case. Now let's check out option D, RQPS. It may be how a man is governed from outside, whilst everything depends upon of comparatively little consequence. Now here QP in the sentence is QP, which is in option D. There are two prepositions which are coming one after the other, and this is therefore grammatically incorrect. This does not happen. So option D is eliminated. We are left with option C. Let's see if it makes sense and confirm our answer. It may be of comparatively little consequence how a man is governed from outside, whilst everything depends upon how he governs himself from within. Makes perfect sense. So this is the right answer. In the next two questions, questions 26 and question 27, you have been given a sentence out of which two of the words have been removed, and you have to select the right pair of words which will fit in perfectly in both the blanks. So in question 26, it reads as doctors and lawyers dash that advertising will certainly dash their profession negatively. Now let's see what possible options we have which will fit in the first blank, in this blank. So doctors and lawyers trust that advertising will certainly dash the profession. Makes sense. Doctors and lawyers believe that advertising will certainly dash the profession. Makes sense. Doctors and lawyers think, and doctors and lawyers argue also makes sense. So the first blank, the options given for the first blank don't help us much in selecting the right pair of words. Let's move on to the second blank and see if this helps us a bit. Doctors and lawyers dash that advertising will certainly damage their profession negatively. It could have been a good option, but since negatively is already mentioned here and the word damage also contains the negative aspect in it, these two words should not be coming together because it would be redundant to place them together. So therefore, option A is eliminated. Let's talk about option B. Doctors and lawyers believe that advertising will certainly affect their profession negatively. Makes sense. Affect means to influence, and it might be influencing their profession negatively. Advertising might be influencing their profession negatively, and therefore this makes some sense. So let's keep this option and see if we have any better option available. Doctors and lawyers think that advertising will certainly boost their profession negatively. The boost is an extremely positive word, and therefore it does not make sense to put it along with the word negatively, which is of course a negative word. So C again does not make sense. Option D. Doctors and lawyers argue that advertising will certainly affect their profession negatively. While argue makes sense, effect does not make much sense. Now, effect has two functions. It can either work as a noun and it can either work it can work as a verb. But in this particular case, what we require is a verb, and therefore the noun meaning of effect does not function here. So as a verb, like we have discussed in the previous question, effect means to bring about or to cause to happen. So now the advertising will certainly cause their profession to happen negatively does not make much sense at all. So option D is also eliminated and option B is the right answer. Moving on to question number 27. Ravi was frustrated that Mohit, who would not dash himself to a deadline, Mohit claimed he was working well without a deadline, but Ravi dash and finally influenced Mohit. So the first sentence, let's see what makes sense. Ravi was frustrated with Mohit, who would not encourage himself to a deadline. Does not make much sense. So let's eliminate option A. Ravi was frustrated with Mohit, who would not cooperate himself to a deadline. Even if by some chance this was correct, it should have been who would not cooperate with himself to a deadline, and it is completely grammatically incorrect. So B option is also eliminated. Let's check option C. Ravi was frustrated with Mohit, who would not commit himself to a deadline. Makes quite a bit of sense. So let's keep this option. Ravi was frustrated with Mohit, who would not declared himself to a deadline. We have already used would, which is a past form of will, and therefore another past form verb is not required here, and therefore D option is also eliminated. We are left with option C, which is the right answer. Let's see if, for the sake of argument, if the second word also fits into the blank. Mohit claimed he was working well without a deadline, but Ravi insisted and finally influenced Mohit. All right, this certainly fits, so C is definitely the answer. Now, you also have to pay attention that because there's this word and right after and you get influence, so whatever word will come here in the blank has to be synonymous with the word influence in order the Out of the four options which we have been provided with, only insisted makes perfect sense with influence. Coming to question 28 and 29. In these questions, you have been provided with the sentence and you have to fill in the blank. There's only one blank given for each of the sentences. Question number question number 28 talks about if you dash to bring the notes, we would not have failed. If you pay attention, in the main clause, this is a classic structure of a type 3 conditional. The main clause says we would not have failed. So whenever you have in a conditional sentence in the main clause would not have or would have, you can understand that the subordinate clause or the if clause should have a past perfect tense word coming in here. So out of the four options given, only one is in the past perfect tense, which is had remembered, or the option C, and this is the right answer. If you had remembered to bring the notes, we would not have failed. In question 29, the sentence structure is in passive form. These gardens dash with velvet grass. This sentence sounds as if it is in passive form and therefore should have a transitive verb coming in the blank and not an intransitive one. So now out of the four options, laid is a form of lay, which is a transitive verb, and lane is a form of lie, which is an intransitive verb. And you should remember that intransitive verb are never expressed in passive form. So in this particular case, only A option makes sense. These gardens are laid with velvet grass. Option C is eliminated because this would mean that the gardens are doing the action of laying down something with velvet grass and it won't have an object. But since lay is a transitive verb, this does not make much sense. Option C is eliminated. And again, the same argument for were lane as well. The only difference is that this has been expressed in past form. Were lane is incorrect because lie is an intransitive verb, and are lane is also incorrect because lie is an intransitive verb. So the right answer is A. The gardens were laid. The gardens are laid with velvet grass. Question 30 and 31 are analogy questions. These questions are about finding the relationship between two words and then selecting another pair of words which has the same kind of a relationship. So let's check out the question number 30. Fortitude is to valor. Now, fortitude is showing courage in the face of pain or adversity. Whenever things are going wrong in your life, and even then you are being courageous, that's when you have fortitude. Valor is also being courageous, but especially in case of war. So in a way, these two words have a synonymous relationship, and we need to find a pair of words which also is synonymous, which also has a synonymous relationship. Now let's check out option A. Option A is timidity and cowardice. Timidity and cowardice are both direct synonyms of each other, and therefore this option could be a plausible option. Let's check option B, heroics and stoicism. Stoicism is an expression of emotionlessness or peace. Having no expression at all on your face is that's when someone will call you stoic. So heroics is something entirely different from stoic. They don't have either a synonymous or antonymous relationship. Moving on to option number C, medal and bravery. Even though these are related, but they are not directly synonyms. These are not direct synonyms. Option D, poem and poet are not synonyms either. A poet writes a poem, and a medal is given when you show an act of bravery, or when you commit an act of bravery. So the right answer here, since option B, C, and D are eliminated, is option A. Question number 31. The two words are penitent and obdurate. Penitent means showing or feeling sorrow, especially when you feel you have done something wrong and you admit that you have done it and you are feeling sorry about your mistake. That's when you are penitent. It's an adjective. Obdurate is also an adjective, which means being extremely stubborn. In a way, penitent and obdurate are actually antonymous with each other. They are opposite of each other. Because in one case, you are admitting your mistake. In the other case, you are refusing to change your opinion, or you are totally refusing to change what you did. So you're not at all feeling guilty or bad about even if you have committed a mistake. So we have to find a pair of words which has an antonymous relationship. So in the first option A, pensive and thoughtless. A pensive person is someone who is in deep or serious thought, someone who is involved in deep or serious thought, while thoughtless is someone who is doing something completely carelessly, is not caring about something at all. So these two are completely antonymous and could be a plausible option. A could be a plausible option. Going to option number B, vacuous is showing any lack of thought or being completely mindless, while empty is, as you know, empty. Vacuous also had an archaic or an obsolete meaning, which meant empty. So they are sort of synonymous with each other. So B option is definitely eliminated. Option C, cumulative or aggressive. Cumulative is increasing due to successive additions, but aggressive is completely different. So this option is also eliminated. Happy and ecstatic are complete synonyms, total synonyms. So this is also eliminated. The right answer has to be A, pensive and thoughtless. In question 32 and 33, you have to choose the option which may substitute the underlined part of the given sentence. In question 32, the sentence says, my dad longs for a Land Cruiser, but this is not true for me because I have always wanted a Pajero. Now, the underlying statement is, but this is not true for me because I have always wanted a Pajero. इसको फिर से कर रहा हूँ 32 वाले को. In questions 32 and 33, you are given a sentence and a part of which has been underlined, and you have to choose the right option, which might substitute that particular part. Now, in question number 32, the sentence says, my dad longs for a Land Cruiser, but this is not true for me because I have always wanted a Pajero. Then the right part is, but this is not true for me because I have always. In this particular case, there are two clauses being talked about here. My dad longs for Land Cruiser, and this is not true for me. And therefore, a conjunction is definitely required. So, but is something which has to be here. Now, in all of the given options, there's one option which does not have this particular conjunction, which is option C, which is not the right answer. Apart from this problem, there's another problem. This particular option C is unnecessarily wordy. We do not need this particular fragment of sentence as opposed to me who has always. We could have expressed it in lesser words, in fewer words. Similarly, in option A, there is the same problem even though we have the conjunction but which we require, but the rest of the sentence is again unnecessarily wordy, and therefore this also cannot be the right answer. Now we are left with option B and D. Option D says, I have always. So let's read the sentence keeping this option in mind. My dad longs for a Land Cruiser. I have always wanted a Pajero. Does not make sense. It feels sort of choppy because again, there was a conjunction required here since we're talking about two different set of ideas joined together. So option D is eliminated and we're left with option B, which reads fine and also makes grammatically correct sense. So my dad longs for a Land Cruiser, but I have always wanted a Pajero. So B is the right answer. Moving on to question number 33. The circle of oak trees in my grandmother's backyard remind me of fairy tales and thoughts of olden time. As soon as you read this sentence, you realize that the subject in this particular sentence is the circle. And the verb in this particular sentence is actually remind. What remind me of fairy tale? The circle of oak trees in my grandmother's backyard. So the focus is on the circle and therefore it is the subject. So since this is the subject and remind is the verb, there has to be an agreement in both the words. So since the subject, the circle is singular, remind has to be a verb with an S. So this should have been reminds and then it would have been grammatically correct. But since it is just remind, this is wrong. So the option A and option B are eliminated for this reason alone. You're left with option C and D. Let's see what makes more sense here. The circle of oak trees in my grandmother's backyard reminds me of fairy tales which caused a thought about olden times, or reminds me of fairy tales and olden times. As soon as we read these options, we realize that a thought here is not required because the word remind itself has the effect of thinking about something. So this particular set of words is redundant or unnecessary. So therefore option C is not as relevant as option D. So we'll cancel out option C, and option D makes perfect sense. So this is the right answer. The following 6 questions deal with an RC passage, a reading comprehension passage. Let's move on directly to the questions. The first question asks us the locale of the phrase acting on a local scale as used in the passage above refers to. Here, this particular phrase acting on a local scale hasn't been given directly. However, it has been alluded to. So in this particular case, let's find out the sentence where we get this in. Here, in the seventh last line, you will find this statement: a strategist acts on a local scale, following what Simon has generally observed. If you read a few more lines before it and after it, you will understand that the context here is of a geographical location and not of a location which is limited by time, that is temporally delimited, or limited by mind, or which is the A option, cognitively delimited space. So all these options are incorrect and only option B makes sense here. Moving on to the next question. The idea of a magic as used in the passage refers to. The word magic has been given in the passage in the first line itself. The Enterprise in the throes of the discovery have an aura of magic around them. So now the question asks us, what does the word magic refer to? The first option is irrationality and blind belief. The second option is a sense of wonder and imagination unbridled by any governance whatsoever. And the third option is a sense of wonder at the discovery of a grand theory. If you carefully read the first few lines, you'll understand that the option A, B, and C are both not relevant here, and the right answer has to be D, none of the above. Let's go back to the passage and see if it makes sense. Now, the first line says enterprises in the throes of discovery have an aura of magic around them. In the world of software, this becomes many splendid with certain joie de vivre, quite distinct from what obtains elsewhere. Enterprises in the throes of discovery. Throes here refers to a struggle. So enterprises who are struggling and who are near to finding a discovery or coming across something new which might be helpful for their business, they have an aura of magic around them. And in the world of software, this becomes many splendid or enriched with many magnificent features. That's what many splendid means. With a certain joie de vivre. Joie de vivre is a phrase which means joy of living, quite distinct from what obtains elsewhere, a sense of wonderment, surprise, and eventual delight, a coming within reach of power and profits, possibly through a little tweak in technology with a touch of novelty, opening up vistas that had always seemed so near yet so far. These 4 or 5 lines are actually referring to kind of excitement a company or the employees of the company might experience when they are very close to something new, something different, which may be path breaking at some level. So here, the context of the magic is not related to any of the 4 options that we had discussed before. I'm sorry, any of the 3 options which were given. Irrationality and blind belief, no, they're not talking about any sort of blind belief or irrationality, but the sheer excitement of something real happening which has never been done before. A sense of wonder at imagination unbridled by any governance whatsoever. There is no context of any sort of authority or governance here, so B option is also eliminated. Option C says a sense of wonder at the discovery of a grand theory. While they are talking about discovery, they are actually talking about discovery of something concrete and not a simple theory, and not something imaginative. So since they're talking about some real decisions being taken place, option C is also not relevant. So the right answer here has to be option D. Question 36. According to the author, the several extant strands of strategy literature, such as the industrial organization approach, provide an incomplete landscape because. Let's first understand what we mean by the word extant. The several extant strands of strategy. Extant is a word which means surviving or existing. So the several existing or surviving strands of strategy literature, that is literature concerned with strategy or the literature which explains or describes strategy. such as the industrial organization approach, provide an incomplete landscape because. So what is the reason that the landscape is incomplete, or why is the author calling the landscape incomplete? That is the point which we have to focus on. The first option says they fail to take account of contributions of Marshall and Shackle. The second option says it is normative in nature. Third option says the vastly rich and unfolding reality is beyond the capacity of human comprehension. And the fourth one is none of the above. Let's first try and understand what we mean by that particular passage, the second paragraph. The second paragraph starts from here. There are several grand theories of even grander traditions. What are the different theories? The theories are the industrial organization approach, including several kinds of structure, conduct, performance assertions, and game theoretic models. Then the next theory is evolutionary theories and corresponding case studies. Then the next theory is resource based approaches or several intermediate variants of competency based ideas that provide us with a rich yet incomplete landscape. So, this is the landscape that they're talking about. The incomplete landscape provided by several intermediate variants of competency based ideas and the other theories, such as the industrial organization approach and evolutionary theories, etc. So, what is the reason the author says this is incomplete? The answer for this particular question is given a few lines below this. Starting to read from this book. This book does not attempt to issue prescriptive or normative guidelines purely because the global canvas is too large and often beyond the capacity of intelligent comprehension. So, in this particular case, the book is not attempting to issue any prescriptive or normative guidelines. What do we mean by that? By prescriptive, which we mean when you're trying to give advice to someone, when you are prescribing something to someone. So, any kind of advice that you should do something in this particular fashion only will be a prescriptive advice. Similarly, normative is something which is normal, which is already set as a standard by the society. So, telling people that you need to do something in this particular fashion because this is how normal people do, or this is what is acceptable, or this is what is normal, is called a normative guideline or normative advice. So prescriptive is what you should be doing, what you are supposed to be doing, so sort of like an authoritative order or something which someone is supposed to do it no matter what. And normative is what already exists, what is considered normal and acceptable, and because it is normal, everybody should be normal. If you are not doing what is normal, then you will be termed as abnormal, that sort of thing. So the author says the book does not attempt to issue any of these kinds of guidelines. Why? Because the global canvas is too large and often beyond the capacity of intelligent comprehension. Because the global canvas is so big, so huge, it is beyond the understanding of humans. Why is he suddenly talking about global canvas? Okay, the answer for this is in a few lines before this particular sentence. Where we left off with incomplete landscape, let's start reading after it. This landscape is perhaps oblivious of certain traditions provided by theory. Oblivious means unconcerned, so this landscape is unconcerned with certain traditions. The rich repertoire bequeathed by Marshall and Shackle is a case in point, as they are immensely rewarding. A case in point means an example. So the rich repertoire, the rich variety which people have received from Marshall and Shackle or inherited from Marshall and Shackle is an example of such a tradition, probably, as they are immensely rewarding. Each important tradition or theory has made global assertions. So this is where we'll understand why our answer is correct. Each important traditions or theory. Here again, you have to keep in mind they're talking about all the different kinds of traditions which have already been discussed, the evolutionary theories, the industrial organization approach, etc. So each of these important traditions or theory has made global assertions and has proved to be prescriptive or normative. So what was common was that they were all talking about the world in general. They were making statements or giving advice with respect to the thinking that it will be applicable to the whole world. And as proved to be, they were either being prescriptive or they were being normative. They were saying that you should follow this advice because this is normal, or you should follow this advice because we are telling you to follow this advice. Some authors have looked back at Marshall and a handful at Shackle. So this eliminates our option A, that they fail to account of contributions of Marshall and Shackle, because here we come to know that some authors have taken into account Marshall and Shackle. So option A is eliminated. Now, fewer still reconsidered certain rich traditions of thinking on strategy. Okay, this book does not attempt to issue prescriptive normative guidelines because the global canvas is too large and often beyond the capacity of intelligent comprehension. And this is the reason why that even though previous stories had talked to us about the global landscape, it was still incomplete, because if the humans cannot understand the global landscape, then how can you talk about it in its entirety? And therefore, the landscape was not complete. And the answer for question number 36 has to be option number C. The vastly rich and unfolding reality is beyond the capacity of human comprehension. Now, to understand that the reason why they're calling it incomplete is because number one, you cannot understand it in the first place. So it's not possible to express it in its complete entirety. Now, option number B, it is normative in nature. This cannot be a reason, because this is not why the landscape is incomplete. This is just one of the features of the advice, or the sort of advice which the different different kinds of literature, different kinds of theories were giving, that this is normal and you should follow it. And it so happens that the author's book is not going to follow the same pattern here. Why it he explains it later in the passage. Question 37. Question 37 talks about which of the following follows from the passage. The first option, Indian software firms have excelled in providing specific solutions. Indian software firms have been remarkable technology innovators. Indian software firms have benefited from low priced manpower and with adequate programming skills, or none of the above. So let's see where the passage is talking about Indian software firms. It is right here in the first paragraph of the passage. Start reading from this line. This book is about exploring. This book is about exploring the journey from rules and norms to solutions. Specific solutions prized out of the inert covers of sector specific industry structures, and often resource determined mindsets that Indian software firms seems to have mastered. So what has the Indian software firm seem to have mastered? The Indian software firms have mastered the resource determined mindsets, and out of these mindsets, the book has figured out a way to extract specific solutions, or rather, the specific solutions which have come from these resource determined mindsets is what this book is talking about. Now, to price out means to take out with great difficulty. So these specific solutions have come out with great difficulty from resource determined mindsets of the Indian software firms, or Indian software firms have come up with a way to provide specific solutions for certain problems. And this is why the answer, or the option A, makes sense for this particular question. Question number 37, option A is the right answer. Indian software firms have excelled in providing specific solutions. B and C is not being talked about. So Indian software firms have been remarkable technology innovators, or Indian software firms have benefited from low price manpower with adequate programming skills. These are not being discussed, but option A is being discussed. It is directly given, of course, with some inference. So the answer is A. Moving on, question number 38. From the passage, which would be an adequate characterization of the other? Is he a positivist, a pragmatist, an empiricist, or cynical? Now, option A, positivist, and option C, empiricist, actually mean the same thing. They are both people who believe that evidence is the best possible way of understanding reality, evidence combined with logic. But empiricist is more focused on the evidence itself than logic, while positivist considers both the evidence as well as logic to be important to him. From a general reading of the passage, both of these options don't seem to have any relevance to what the author is trying to say. So we'll eliminate them both. Now, option B and option D are what we are left with. Could he be cynical? Now, cynical is a person who believes that everyone is motivated by these selfish motives and is therefore doubtful of everybody's intention, to the extent that there is slight sadness or slight pessimism in his worldview, in the way in which he looks at things. So it doesn't seem to to be the case with this particular author. He's not in any way implying that everybody is motivated by their selfish motives, or nor is he doubtful of their intention, nor is he being slightly pessimistic in any way. So option D is also eliminated. Option D is therefore the right answer. He's pragmatist because he talks about how the global canvas is beyond human comprehension. So his advice is focused on what happens in a local area, in a geographically smaller area. He's also against being prescriptive or normative, as in he's not saying that you should do this because I'm telling you to do this, nor is he saying that you should do something because this is what everybody is doing. So he's not talking about those such irrational ideas. He's being more practical in his approach. And in the last paragraph, he directly emphasizes on pragmatism as well. So based on this argument, option B seems to be the right answer. Question 39. From its usage in the passage, which is the most appropriate meaning of the word wizard? The word wizard features in the first paragraph of the RC. Reading the first few lines, enterprises in the throes of discovery have an aura of magic around them. In the world of software, this becomes many splendored, or rather, full of magnificent features. Many splendid means full of magnificent features. So this becomes full of magnificent features with a certain joie de vivre. Joie de vivre is a word which means joy of living. So they're basically talking about a company which is about to discover something new, and the struggle it undergoes, or the conflict it undergoes right before a discovery is about to happen, has an aura of magic around it, and is also has a certain enthusiasm towards life because they know that they are going to come up with something new which nobody has done before. Now this joie de vivre is quite distinct from what obtains elsewhere or what is found elsewhere. A sense of wonderment, surprise, and eventual delight. Delight is happiness. A coming within reach of power and profits, possibly through a little tweak in technology with a touch of novelty. That is, if they are probably trying to change technology a little bit and trying to do something differently, and which would open a lot many more avenues because they'll have a new product which might be wanted by a lot many more people than other products are wanted by, possibly. So they'll come under the reach of power and profits, opening up vistas or scenes or scenarios or things which they anticipate to happen that had always seemed so near yet so far. So things which they had anticipated, which they had been anticipated for a long period of time, and they thought that they are about to reach it, yet they couldn't explain and they couldn't help but understand that they are not as near as they thought they would be. They start coming into their realm. They start understanding that soon these things will be possible, which they thought probably were very easy to achieve but are not so easy as well. So in professional management terms, this waving of the wizard's wand. So this whole process is happening. This company is struggling, and at the same time, they are also f- anticipating that something good is along the way. It almost seems like it is a wizard which is doing some sort of magic, and that is why there is an aura of magic around this particular thing, around aura of magic around the enterprise. So in a way, you can understand that the wizard does his magic because he knows something about reality which the other people don't. This is a wise person who can make certain decisions because of which certain things become possible. But to the outsider, it seems that it is completely magical around them. So this is the context in which um, the author is talking about, and therefore, for this particular question, the answer has to be option B, which is a person of wisdom. To question 40. from its usage in the passage which is not the most appropriate meaning of the word ingenuity. So, which one of the following is not what ingenuity means according to the passage? Okay. Now, ingenuity in general uh, means something which is creative or something which is original, something which is fresh, and something which is also intelligent. So let's see what the in what context the passage is talking about. The word ingenuity is given in the first paragraph. The first paragraph talks about, especially in this particular line, originality is the fountainhead of such a strategy. It then progresses into the realms of economics of innovation to give itself a solid foundation from where it becomes possible to retrieve a new language of strategy and of innovation. In this high, naturally dynamic world, the profit motive or the intention to make profit, backed by ingenuity, lend support to many of the arguments that evolve in this flow of events. So the ingenuity here is in a way also talking about the originality mentioned here, and definitely it has some sort of a positive meaning. Going back to the question, possibly be original, it could also be creative, it could also be clever, but it cannot be cunning in this context because cunning means to get something by employing deceit or skill or some sort of fraudulent activities in some sort of trickery, which will make other people become confused or fall into a trap, and then you'll get what you want. So this is not the intended meaning of ingenuity in the passage, but it is more closer to origin being original or something which is positive. So B, C, and D being the positive meaning words can be eliminated. The right answer is A. Thank you for your time. It was pleasant teaching you. I hope you enjoyed the mock.